When it comes to fictional timelines, few are more extensive and convoluted as the Legend of Zelda series. The first four mainline titles kept things simple, adhering to a streamlined series of interconnected events confined to a single shared universe. In the original Legend of Zelda, we follow Link as he embarked on a quest to save Princess of Hyrule and perennial damsel in distress Zelda from the evil clutches of the wizarding man-bear-pig thing known as Ganon. Naturally, the game was a success, spawning a sequel. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link was a direct continuation of the first game, featuring the same Link but not the same Zelda. Apparently, the Zelda from the previous game was a different Zelda, while the one in this game is a Zelda from an earlier era. Lore-wise, this makes sense because reasons. The third game, A Link to the Past, was a prequel to the entire series, taking place long before the first game. It also got its own sequel, Link's Awakening, which is set shortly after A Link to the Past. For years, this was the one and only Zelda timeline. Then 1998 rolled around, and with it, the release of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This one game was not only the first 3D title in the series, but also the very first entry in the timeline, taking place centuries before the events of Link to the Past. This was a significant revelation, made doubly so by the introduction of time travel elements. Link's ability to traverse different time periods was reminiscent of films like Back to the Future and The Terminator. By altering the past, he could presumably reshape the future. Some alterations worked in his favor, while others came with dire consequences. Link's temporal tampering fractured the pre-existing timeline, creating 3 new realities: the decline or downfall timeline, the child timeline, and the adult timeline. Each timeline's inception is tied to specific events that occurred during or after the climax of Ocarina of Time. In the downfall timeline, Ganon defeats Link during their final battle in Ocarina of Time. This victory allows him to obtain the complete Triforce and with it, ultimate power. Hyrule would have been doomed if not for Zelda and the other sages who, through their combined power, managed to seal Ganon in the Sacred Realm, albeit temporarily. The games that occur in this timeline are, in chronological order, Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, A Link Between Worlds, Triforce Heroes, Echoes of Wisdom, the original Legend of Zelda, and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. In the child timeline, Link defeats Ganon and then returns to his own time to live out his childhood. Upon arriving in the present, he warns a young Zelda about the threat Ganondorf poses to Hyrule. His intervention likely results in the Gerudo King's arrest and subsequent banishment to the Twilight Realm. This timeline includes Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, and Four Swords Adventure. The adult timeline shares some similarities with the child timeline. Ganon is defeated by Link and imprisoned in the Sacred Realm. Then Link is sent back to the present. But whereas the child timeline follows Link in his own time, the adult timeline centers on the future he left behind, a future without a hero to protect it from Ganon. This leads to the events of Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. For years, Ocarina of Time topped the pre-split timeline as the first game in the series, but this chronology changed with the inclusion of 3 additional titles, all of which are set before Ocarina of Time. Skyward Sword replaced it as the earliest adventure in Zelda's history, followed by the Minish Cap and finally Four Swords. Some fans were less than pleased with these changes, pointing out inconsistencies, then reordering games to create a more cohesive series of events. But for what it was, the official Zelda timeline did its job. It took numerous seemingly unrelated stories and connected them in a fairly straightforward way, while simultaneously enriching the series lore. From a narrative perspective, its creation was a great idea. Then release of Breath of the Wild and its direct sequel Tears of the Kingdom threw a proverbial spanner in the works. From the outset, this duology was never given a definitive spot on the timeline, save for taking place after Ocarina of Time, as implied by series producer Eiji Aonuma. On the other hand, he also suggested that it has no actual timeline placement, leaving that decision up to the players. So, yeah. These contrasting responses suggest that Aonuma is more concerned with making fun games than figuring out how they connect to one another. Ultimately, he seems content with letting the Zelda community fill the role of historian, even though another update to the timeline was introduced in 2024, but that's neither here nor there. In this video, I'd like to explore other theoretical possibilities, potential timelines that could accommodate Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Just remember, these are simply my opinions, so don't take them too seriously. Unless you want to, of course. That's fine too. I ain't your boss. Do what you like. But anyway, let's wrap up this intro and get to speculating. Some fans seem to agree that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom take place at the very end of the timeline. The question is, which branch? There seem to be two big contenders among fans, the child timeline and the adult timeline, and it's easy to see why, considering that both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are stuffed to the gills with callbacks to previous Zelda titles. Arbiter's grounds were taken straight from Twilight Princess, suggesting these sequels could belong in the child timeline. There's also a mysterious stone disc that some players insist is the Mirror of Twilight, though I'm not entirely convinced about that one. The genuine article was shattered into a million pieces, not big puzzle-like chunks. Just saying. When it comes to the adult timeline, Wind Waker provides two pieces of evidence. The first is salt. Scattered throughout Hyrule are numerous deposits of sea salt, suggesting that certain areas of the landscape might have once been underwater, under a great sea, if you will. Then there's the presence of the Rito, a race of bird-like creatures first introduced in the Wind Waker that were, presumably, the evolved version of Zora. However, the fact that both the Rito and Zora are featured in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom casts serious doubt on a Wind Waker connection. There's also the chance that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are the products of all three timelines converging into one. All of these theories are plausible in their own way, but I have one of my own. Maybe, just maybe, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom exist in a fourth, unseen timeline. Near the end of Skyward Sword, Link uses the power of the Triforce to send the Isle of the Goddess plummeting to the surface. It then lands on top of the imprisoned, completely destroying him. Afterwards, Link and his friends are celebrating, believing they've saved the world from demise. Then Girahim shows up and yoinks Zelda. He carries her through the Gate of Time to the distant past, shortly after Hylia had sealed away demise and raised Skyloft into the heavens. He then uses Zelda to restore the Demon King to full power. After a fierce battle, Link manages to beat Demise and seal his consciousness inside the Master Sword. But before Demise completely keels over, he puts a curse on those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, saying that an incarnation of his hatred will be reborn in an endless cycle to plague them for all time. Link and Zelda don't pay no mind to all that jibber-jabber and return to the present. The rest, as they say, is history. Hyrule is founded, Ganondorf shows up from time to cause trouble, Link and Zelda defeat him, rinse and repeat. But what about the other timeline, the one in the distant past, where Link and Demise had their epic battle, the timeline where Demise isn't a threat anymore? How did it progress? Maybe, just maybe, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom fall into this lost timeline. In Tears, we meet someone who is presumably the first Ganondorf in Hyrule's history, and learn that he's been sealed beneath Hyrule Castle since the Imprisoning War. If this is the case, he would have had no physical presence, i.e. his Gerudo form, until the events of Tears of the Kingdom, when Zelda and Link accidentally free him. But then there's the question of Calamity Ganon. Since Demise's curse centers on the cycle of death and rebirth, it's plausible that a new version of Ganondorf only appears after the previous one has died. However, The Ganondorf seen in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom has seemingly been removed from that cycle, reduced to an immortal living corpse during the Imprisoning War. In this instance, Malice, and by extension Calamity Ganon, act as surrogates, simulating life and rebirth in Ganondorf's absence, and ensuring that Demise's curse continues to follow its prophesized path. And speaking of the curse, when Demise placed it on Link and Zelda in the distant past, he theoretically bound it to their unborn counterparts in that particular timeline, which explains why Ganondorf even exists in the era of the Wilds. Worse yet, when Link and Zelda returned to the present after defeating Demise, they carried the curse with them, ultimately introducing it to the other three timelines, thus dooming all versions of Hyrule to an endless cycle of darkness.
You idiot!
So now that we've discussed the creation of the Lost Timeline, how does it differ from the other three? Well, for starters, the events of Skyward Sword would play out differently. With Demise gone, there'd be no Imprison to contend with. There'd also be no Girahim to resurrect him. In a statement made by Skyward Sword's character designers, it's mentioned that Girahim is around the same age as Link, which is kind of hard to believe, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I always assumed that Girahim was several millennia old, but hey, the designers say otherwise, so I guess we gotta go with it. Now, having said that, since Demise dies thousands of years before Link's birth, we can conclude that in this timeline, he never creates Girahim. As a result, Zelda is never kidnapped, Link never finds a goddess sword, as there's no need for it, and the residents of Skyloft live out their lives in blissful ignorance, at least for a while. Eventually, Null, the main villain from Echoes of Wisdom, escapes his imprisonment and starts wreaking havoc on the surface. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this character and his backstory, Null is an evil, ancient creature that occupied the primordial void prior to the creation of the world. Think Erebus from Greek mythology. But yeah, Null's main goal is to return all reality to nothingness by destroying everything in existence. To stop this from happening, the Golden Goddesses seal Null away for millennia. When the seal is eventually broken, Null resumes its mission of chaos and destruction. In Echoes of Wisdom, Null kidnaps Zelda to gain access to the Triforce, or Prime Energy in this case. But this version of Zelda isn't in possession of the Triforce of Wisdom, as all three pieces are still hidden in Skykeep, so Null doesn't bother coming after her. Even so, the creature eventually senses where the Triforce is, and its dark magic pierces the cloud barrier between Skyloft and the surface. Rifts start popping up across Skyloft. These tears in space-time are caused by Null's attempts to return the world to nothingness. Anyone swallowed by one is sent to a parallel dimension called the Still World and kept in suspended animation until they ultimately fade from existence. Through the rifts, Null creates dark copies or echoes of people trapped inside. The creature uses these clones as soldiers and saboteurs, spreading confusion and chaos throughout Skyloft. Lake, a member of the Knights Academy, is among those captured and cloned. Tri, a magical spirit created by the Golden Goddesses to close the rifts, uses its celestial power to phase through the cloud barrier. It travels to Skyloft looking for help to both mend the rifts and free its fellow spirits that are trapped in the Still World, alongside the Skyloftians. Unfortunately, no one can see Tri unless they visited the Still World. No one, that is, except for Zelda. This version of Zelda, like her Skyward Sword ancestor, is Link's childhood friend and the daughter of the Knights Academy's headmaster. Tri tells her about the threat Null poses and asks for her help. Zelda agrees and is given the Tri-Rod, which allows her to create echoes of her own. Together, she and Tri mend the rifts in Skyloft and rescue those trapped inside, including our boy Link. Once order has been restored, Tri explains the Null situation to the headmaster, who can now see them. The headmaster agrees to help, and by help, I mean task Zelda and Tri with traveling to the surface and defeating Null, while he provides moral support from the comfort and safety of his private study. But he's not completely worthless. He appoints Link to accompany them on their journey. But before the trio can set out, they need to figure out a way to reach the surface. In Skyward Sword, magical tablets are required to breach the cloud barrier, and since Zelda hasn't unlocked any waypoints on the surface, provided they even exist in this era, Tri can't simply teleport the party wherever they need to go. As they try to figure out a plan, Link is contacted by Fi, who is aware of the situation. She explains that she was created to assist Hylia's chosen hero in defeating Demise. She then mentions that she can no longer sense Demise's life force, suggesting that someone or something must have defeated him. Even so, Null has filled a power vacuum once occupied by the Demon King and needs to be stopped. Tri, as a divine spirit, can also see and interact with Fi and wholeheartedly agrees. Fi instructs Link to draw the Goddess Sword, hoping that its power can be of use against Null and its minions. She then gives him the Emerald Tablet, which, with the help of loft wings and sailcloths, allows the party to reach the surface. Upon landing, the team discovers a giant rift where the Temple of Hylia is supposed to be. They venture inside and come across an imprisoned Impa. However, this isn't the same Impa from Skyward Sword, but one of her descendants who, like her predecessors, maintains the Temple of Hylia as a priestess, awaiting the return of the goddess's mortal reincarnation. The party manages to save her, along with Tri's friends, so yay team. Impa has never heard of Null or its plans, but the party brings her up to speed. Her attention then turns to Zelda, who she senses is the reincarnation of Hylia. She suggests awakening Zelda's goddess power to give them an edge against Null. Fi agrees and follows up with her own proposal, which is to forge the Master Sword by seeking out the 3 sacred flames. She believes that the sword could be a backup plan in case Zelda is unable to awaken her powers. After confirming their plans, the group sets out, with Impa as their newest party member. They travel from region to region, awakening Zelda's power via the sacred springs of Farron Woods and Elden Volcano, along with closing any rifts they come across. 2 of these rifts contain the dragons Farron and Elden. After being released, they imbue the goddess sword with their flames. As in Skyward Sword, Lanayru is dead by the time the group finds him, because like most stubborn old fools, he neglects his health. But with the use of time stones, our heroes are able to revive him and receive his flame, after retrieving it from Tantalus, who still exists in this timeline. By this time, Zelda has fully awakened her powers and blesses Link's blade, transforming it into the true Master Sword. In this timeline, Link never learns the Song of the Hero, since opening the way to Sky Keep could presumably make it easier for Null to reach the Triforce, or Prime Energy in this case. Not that the Triforce is even necessary, because the team is more than capable of taking down Null without it, which is exactly what happens. Null is ultimately no match for the combined powers of Zelda, Tri, and the Master Sword, and is completely destroyed, along with any remaining rifts. With the world saved, peace returns to the surface and Skyloft. Tri and its friends bid Zelda goodbye and leave for parts unknown. Then Zelda and some of the Skyloftians relocate to the surface and build a new civilization, alongside the Gorons, Sheikah, and other races. Link and the remaining Skyloftians remain in the sky to watch over the Master Sword and the Triforce. Thousands of years pass without incident. Over time, the Skyloftians evolve into the Zonai. Their new forms resemble those of real-world animals that live at high altitudes, and make them more suited to a life in the heavens. At some point, the Zonai either discover the secret stones, or they're given to them by the goddesses. These stones allow them to further advance their civilization, as well as turn into dragons if they swallow them, like one of those spicy food challenges that are all the rage among masochists.
I tried this one chilling that set my mouth on fire and I had to drink a 2-liter of Mountain Dew.
They also give the Zonai a way to breach the cloud barrier besides the ancient tablets. Eventually, a portion of the Zonai population descends to the surface and come into contact with the Hylians. At this point in time, the surface is a mess, either because of natural disasters or the early stages of Demise's curse. Siblings Rauru and Minoru helped bring stability to the land and found the kingdom of Hyrule, with the former becoming its first king, alongside his Hylian queen, Sonia. Over time, Most of the Zonai either die out or return to the sky. I'm guessing the latter happened. Call it a gut feeling. In any case, Rauru and Minoru are the only ones left. From there, Ganondorf, a living representation of Demise's curse, appears and starts the Imprisoning War. Except in this unaltered timeline, Zelda never goes back in time. The sages are still defeated in battle and Rauru sacrifices himself to imprison Ganon. But in this timeline, Sonia survives and gives birth to Zelda's ancestor. For this to happen, Sonia would have to have been pregnant at some point during the Imprisoning War. Considering that both she and Rauru are related to Zelda, this seems to be the only way that Zelda could have been born. But what about Zelda's time-traveling shenanigans, I hear you say? Well, that's simple, but not really. Nintendo is pretty inconsistent when it comes to the rules of time travel, but I'll do my best to try and explain it. Try being the key word. Admittedly, I'm no expert on this subject, so please just bear with me. Now then, when Zelda travels back in time to participate in the Imprisoning War, she creates a new timeline. And when the broken Master Sword is sent back in time, it creates yet another timeline, as even inanimate objects can be catalysts for time manipulation. But since Zelda has already gone back into the past in Tears of the Kingdom's base timeline, a version of her is also present in the third timeline's past, though not the same Zelda that's present in the first timeline. On a side note, there are two Master Swords in this altered timeline, one in the sky and one on the surface, which is kind of neat. But anyway, thousands of years later, this second Zelda returns to the base timeline in dragon form with the restored Master Sword. She does this by using space-time wormholes. I think this is the most reasonable explanation since we see other dragons vanishing and emerging from portals in the sky in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. This explanation also creates a partial timeline merger, but that's okay, as it only helps bring stability to the base timeline, since this second Zelda is reoccupying the space left behind by her variant. So that leaves the question of what happened to the Zelda from the second timeline. Honestly, I'm not sure, but that's the subject for another video. And with that little tangent out of the way, let's go back to the base timeline. So Rauru kills Ganondorf, and Sonia gives birth to Zelda's ancestor, who stuffs the Gerudo King under Hyrule Castle like old Christmas decorations. Centuries pass, the royal family in Hyrule flourish, all the while forgetting that the G-Man is right under their feet. Over time, malice starts spilling out of Ganondorf and forms Calamity Ganon, an avatar that starts spreading chaos throughout Hyrule. In response, Zelda and the races of Hyrule unite to mount an offensive. The divine beasts and guardians are built to give them a better chance at victory, but it's not enough. That's okay though. Word of Calamity Ganon reaches Skyloft, or Fi in specific, or rather the remnants of her still residing in the Master Sword. She contacts this reptilian, who happens to be an incarnation of Link.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
For the purpose of this video, we'll call him the Ancient Hero. Here, we run into a bit of a snag. In the most recent trailer for Hyrule Warriors: Age of Imprisonment, we're given a glimpse of what's likely the Ancient Hero. This inclusion doesn't really make sense. In Breath of the Wild, we're shown a mural depicting a battle that took place in the distant past. Many fans speculate that the figure wielding the Master Sword is the Ancient Hero. If this is the case, he never fought Ganondorf, but instead Calamity Ganon, alongside the Guardians and Divine Beasts, all of which had no presence during the Imprisoning War, at least as far as we know. Moreover, the previous Musou Zelda games are considered non-canon, so we can assume the same applies to Age of Imprisonment. Though to be fair, it's probably more canonical than my theory, but we ain't gonna talk about that right now. Also, we're going to assume that he's a Zonai, since Rauru and Minoru both resemble different animals, with the former resembling a goat and the latter resembling a finnick hare hybrid. We can assume that biodiversity is commonplace in this future version of Skyloft. So, the Ancient Hero takes up the Master Sword and descends to Hyrule. He links up with Zelda and her forces, and together they manage to seal Calamity Ganon. But sadly, the ancient hero is mortally wounded in battle and eventually succumbs to his injuries. Afterwards, the royal family entrusts the Master Sword's protection to the Great Deku Tree. From here, everything happens as it did prior to Breath of the Wild. The royal family gets suspicious of the Sheikah and banishes them from Hyrule. Then they bury the Guardians and Divine Beasts, which remain hidden for thousands of years. Eventually, the Sheikah are allowed to return to Hyrule, and the events of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom happen as normal, with the latter's time-traveling plot repeating over and over, creating an infinite number of alternate timelines, and as a result, preserving Demise's curse for all time.
What will you learn? What will you learn? That your actions have consequences!
To close this video out, I want to address the big timeline-hopping elephant in the room. Both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom feature callbacks to previous Zelda games. These callbacks include things like the Temple of Time, Arbiter's Grounds, and the Great Deku Tree. This suggests that the game takes place in a unified chronology that squishes every Zelda timeline together into a smorgasbord of delicious fan service. However, I have my own theory as to why these and other elements are present, and it all has to do with the concept of fate, inevitabilities that span multiple timelines. Certain elements, such as the ones I previously mentioned, act as absolute points. They're plucked from the 3 original timelines and converge onto a single point, which in this case is the Hyrule seen in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Whatever temporal forces oversee this particular timeline could be striving for consistency, introducing elements and events shared by multiple timelines to avoid potential paradoxes caused by any and all instances of time travel. The means by which these elements emerge may be different from timeline to timeline, but all that matters is that they exist and give some degree of stability to the affected timeline. Some elements are seemingly more important than others, which is why some series staples like certain dungeons aren't present in our 4th timeline. Basically, the timeline takes only what it needs. And that's that. Another way that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom could fit into the Zelda timeline. I had a really good time with this one. Admittedly, this theory isn't perfect, and I'm sure there are things I missed, so feel free to let me know in the comment section. Also, should you have any ideas of your own about alternate Zelda timelines, make sure to mention those too. And lastly, if you like the video, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel out a lot. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next go-round.
I tried this one chilling that set my mouth on fire and I had to drink a 2-liter of Mountain Dew.